I discovered that I am not the father of my 14-year-old son, and my wife wants to have a happy family with the biological father. But in court, my son spoke up, leaving my wife desperate. The truth surfaced during a routine medical appointment. My son needed minor surgery, and the blood typing revealed what 14 years of bedtime stories, late-night soccer practices, and midnight fevers never could. The numbers didn't lie, even when everything else in my marriage apparently had. My wife didn't bother denying it when I confronted her. She sat at our kitchen table, the same worn oak surface where we'd shared thousands of meals together, and told me she wanted to do things right this time. The biological father, a man named Desmond who she'd reconnected with online 2 years prior, was ready to step into the role. They'd been planning this carefully, she admitted without remorse, waiting for what they considered the right moment. The right moment apparently meant blindsiding me with divorce papers and a custody petition that painted me as an obstacle to my son's authentic family structure. Her lawyer used phrases like psychological best interest and biological connection, as if the past 14 years were meaningless footnotes in someone else's story. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. My brother kept urging me to fight back, but I didn't know what fighting looked like when the ground beneath you has completely shifted and crumbled away. The custody hearing arrived on a gray Tuesday morning in early November. My wife sat with Desmond on one side of the courtroom, already performing the happy family unit she'd envisioned for months. Her lawyer presented their case with practiced efficiency, arguing that my son deserved to know his real father, that continuing to live with me would only confuse his developing sense of identity. When my turn came, I had no dramatic speeches prepared. I simply told the judge about the years, the homework sessions that stretched past midnight, the time my son broke his arm, and I held him in the emergency room for 6 long hours. The countless conversations about friendships, about girls, about what kind of man he wanted to become someday. Then my son asked to speak. The judge allowed it, and I watched my boy stand up in that courtroom with a steadiness I didn't know he possessed. He looked directly at his mother with an expression far older than 14. "You keep talking about what I need," he said, his voice unwavering. "But you never actually asked me. Not once." He turned to face the judge. "That man," he pointed at Desmond, "sent me a birthday card last year. One single card. My dad has been there every single day of my life. I don't care about blood or biology. I know exactly who my father is." My wife's composure shattered completely. She started whispering frantically to her lawyer, but my son wasn't finished speaking. "I want to live with my dad. That's my choice, and it should matter." The judge nodded slowly, making careful notes. My wife stared at me with an expression I couldn't quite decipher, something caught between raw fury and creeping desperation. Desmond shifted uncomfortably in his seat, suddenly looking like a man who'd wandered into the wrong room entirely. The judge announced she would deliver her official ruling within the week. As we filed out, my wife grabbed my arm hard in the hallway. "This isn't over," she hissed through clenched teeth. "You turned him against me." I pulled away without responding. There was nothing left to say. Walking toward the parking garage afterward, my son was unusually quiet. The confidence he displayed in the courtroom had faded into something heavier and more troubled. He kept glancing at me sideways, then looking away quickly. Finally, as I unlocked the car, he stopped walking. "Dad, there's something else I need to tell you," he said slowly. "About Mom and Desmond. Something I discovered on her phone last month that I haven't told anyone yet." His voice dropped to barely a whisper. "I think they're planning to take me out of the country." The parking garage suddenly felt colder than it had a moment before. Distant car engines echoed off concrete walls, but all I could focus on was my son's face, pale under the fluorescent lights. "What do you mean?" I asked carefully, keeping my voice steady even though my heart had started pounding. "What exactly did you see?" He shifted his weight from foot to foot, the way he always did when he was nervous about something. "Last month, when I was at Mom's apartment for the weekend, she left her phone on the kitchen counter while she was in the shower. It buzzed, and I wasn't trying to snoop, I swear. But the notification preview showed a message from Desmond, and it mentioned plane tickets and passports. I leaned against the car, processing this. Did you read more?" I opened it. I know I shouldn't have, but something felt off about the whole thing. He rubbed the back of his neck. The message said something about how everything would be easier once they got to Portugal, that Desmond has family there who could help them start fresh. There was stuff about how the courts here were too slow and unpredictable. Portugal, Desmond's family, starting fresh. The words tumbled through my mind like stones in a dryer. "Did you take screenshots? Any proof?" My son shook his head miserably. I heard the shower turn off and I panicked. I just put the phone back and pretended I hadn't seen anything. I've been trying to figure out what to do ever since. I was scared if I told you before the hearing, it would mess everything up somehow. But after what happened in there today, I figured you needed to know. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to think rationally. Panic wouldn't help either of us. "You did the right thing telling me. We'll figure this out together, okay?" He nodded, but I could see the fear still lingering in his eyes. This was too much weight for a 14-year-old to carry. We drove home mostly in silence. The route was familiar, past the strip mall where we used to get ice cream after Little League games, past the library where I'd taken him every Saturday morning as a toddler. All these landmarks of a life built together, now shadowed by the possibility that someone wanted to erase them entirely. When we got home, I told my son to start on his homework while I made some phone calls. He disappeared into his room without argument, probably grateful to focus on something as mundane as algebra equations. I called my brother first. He answered on the second ring. "How'd it go?" he asked immediately. "Did the judge say anything?" The judge is ruling within the week, but that's not why I'm calling. I explained what my son had told me, keeping my voice low even though his bedroom door was closed. My brother listened without interrupting. When I finished, he let out a long exhale. That's serious. Have you called your lawyer yet? You're my first call. Call her now. Tonight. This changes everything. My lawyer, a sharp woman named Pauline Reyes who'd been recommended by a colleague at work, picked up after several rings. She sounded tired, probably wrapping up a long day, but her voice sharpened as I relayed the information. Your son saw these messages himself on his mother's phone? Yes, he didn't take screenshots, but he's certain about what he read. That's unfortunate about the lack of documentation, but it's still significant. A credible report of potential international parental abduction can trigger certain legal protections. I heard papers shuffling on her end. I'm going to file an emergency motion first thing tomorrow morning. We'll request that the court issue any exeat order, which would prevent either parent from removing the child from the jurisdiction without express permission. I'll also notify the relevant authorities so they can flag the passports. Can they actually stop her from leaving if she tries? If we get the order in place quickly enough, yes. Airports and border control can be notified. It's not foolproof, but it adds significant obstacles. She paused. I should warn you, though. This is going to escalate things considerably. Your wife will know you're aware of her plans, and she'll likely respond aggressively. Are you prepared for that? I thought about the look on my wife's face in the courthouse hallway. The barely contained rage, the desperation. I don't have a choice, I said. I can't risk losing him. Understood. I'll call you in the morning after I filed. In the meantime, keep your son close and document everything. If she contacts you, save the messages, but don't engage in any way that could be used against you later. After hanging up, I sat in the quiet of my living room for a long time. The house felt different somehow, every familiar corner now charged with uncertainty. I'd lived here for 12 years. My son had learned to walk in this living room, had celebrated birthdays in the backyard, had grown from a babbling toddler into the young man who'd stood up in court today and chosen me. The thought of someone trying to take him away to another country, to uproot him from everything he knew, made something fierce and protective rise in my chest. I'd spent the past few months feeling like the ground was crumbling beneath me, unsure how to fight back against forces I didn't understand. But this was different. This was a clear threat to my son, and clarity, even terrible clarity, was something I could work with. I made dinner that night. Nothing fancy, just spaghetti with meat sauce, one of my son's favorites. He emerged from his room when I called and sat at the kitchen table, pushing his food around with his fork. Dad, am I going to have to testify again or something? I don't know yet. My lawyer is filing some paperwork tomorrow to make sure you can't be taken out of the country without permission. Beyond that, we'll have to wait and see. He was quiet for a moment. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner about what I saw on her phone. Hey, I waited until he looked up at me. You were in an impossible situation. You're 14 years old and the adults in your life put you in the middle of something you never should have been part of. You did nothing wrong. His eyes were shiny and he blinked rapidly. I just keep thinking about how different everything is now. Like, 3 months ago I thought I knew what my life was. I thought I knew who everyone was. And now, I know. Believe me, I know. Does it get easier? Feeling like everything you believed was a lie? The question hit me harder than I expected. I'd been so focused on the legal battle, on protecting my son, that I hadn't fully allowed myself to sit with my own grief about the marriage, the betrayal, the 14 years of believing something that was never true. I think it does get easier, I said slowly. Not because the truth changes, but because you learn to build something new, something honest. He considered this, then nodded slightly. I'm glad you're my dad, he said quietly. Like, not just because of the court stuff. I've always been glad. My throat tightened. I'm glad you're my son. Nothing about that has changed or ever will. We finished dinner in comfortable silence, and afterward, he helped me wash dishes without being asked. Small moments like these, the ordinary rhythm of shared life, felt precious in ways I'd never fully appreciated before. The next morning, Pauline called at 8:30 sharp. The emergency motion had been filed, and a hearing was scheduled for that afternoon. The judge, the same one who'd presided over the custody hearing, had taken the potential flight risk seriously. She's going to be served this morning, Pauline told me. I'd recommend you keep your son home from school today, just to be safe. The order isn't in place yet, and I don't want any gaps in supervision. I agreed, then went to explain the situation to my son. He accepted the unexpected day off with mixed emotions, relieved to skip school but clearly anxious about what it meant. Can we do something normal? He asked. Like, I don't know, watch a movie or something? I don't want to just sit around thinking about all this. So we watched movies. We worked through a bag of microwave popcorn and argued good-naturedly about whether the sequel was better than the original. For a few hours, we pretended life was ordinary. It was exactly what both of us needed. The hearing that afternoon was brief but intense. Pauline had prepared thoroughly, presenting my son's account of the messages he'd seen along with character references attesting to my role as primary caregiver over the years. My wife's lawyer objected strenuously, calling the claims speculative and unsupported, but the judge seemed unconvinced. Given the credibility of the minor's testimony during the initial hearing and the specificity of the information regarding international travel plans, I'm granting the emergency motion, the judge announced. Any exeat order is hereby issued. Neither parent may remove the minor from this jurisdiction without prior court approval. Additionally, I'm ordering that the minor's passport be surrendered to the court pending resolution of the custody matter. I exhaled a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. Pauline squeezed my arm briefly. My wife sat rigid in her seat, her face a mask of controlled fury. Desmond wasn't present this time, perhaps advised by her lawyer to maintain some distance given the new allegations. When the hearing concluded, she swept out of the courtroom without looking at me. That evening, Pauline called with an update. The passport has been flagged, and I filed the necessary notifications with relevant agencies. If anyone tries to purchase plane tickets using your son's information, it will raise immediate red flags. You can breathe a little easier. I thanked her profusely, but the relief was tempered by the knowledge that this was far from over. The custody battle was still ongoing, and my wife was not someone who gave up easily. The official custody ruling came 5 days later. I was at work when Pauline called, and I stepped outside into the November chill to take it. "Primary physical custody awarded to you," she said, and I could hear the satisfaction in her voice. "Joint legal custody, with supervised visitation for the mother until further evaluation." The judge cited the strength of the established parent-child relationship and the concerning evidence regarding potential flight risk. I stood in the parking lot behind my office building, phone pressed to my ear, and felt something loosen in my chest that had been clenched tight for months. It's really over? The initial custody determination is over. She can appeal, and there will be ongoing proceedings to sort out the visitation details. But in terms of the main question of who your son lives with, that's settled. He's staying with you. When I got home that evening, my son was waiting by the door. He'd clearly been tracking the news somehow, maybe checking Pauline's website for updates, or just reading my expression as I walked in. "Did we win?" he asked, the hope in his voice almost painful to hear. "You're staying with me." The judge ruled in our favor. He let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob, and then he was hugging me, his face pressed against my shoulder. He'd gotten tall over the past year, almost my height now, but in that moment he felt like the little boy I'd carried on my shoulders at the state fair, the kid who'd held my hand crossing busy streets. "Thank you for fighting for me," he mumbled into my shirt. "I know it wasn't easy. I would do it 1,000 times over. You're my son. That's never going to change." We stood there in the entryway for a long moment, just holding on. The weeks that followed were an adjustment. My wife's calls stopped completely for a while, then resumed with a more measured tone once her lawyer presumably advised her that antagonizing me wouldn't help her visitation case. The supervised visits were awkward by all accounts, my son returning from them quiet and thoughtful. "It's weird," he told me one evening after a Saturday visit. "She keeps trying to act like everything's normal, but it's not. You can't just pretend away what happened. How do you feel about seeing her?" He considered the question seriously. "I don't hate her or anything. She's still my mom, but I don't trust her right now. Maybe someday that'll change, but right now I just feel like I have to be on guard the whole time." That's understandable. Trust is rebuilt slowly, through consistent action over time. If she's genuinely committed to having a relationship with you, she'll need to demonstrate that through her behavior, not just her words. He nodded. That's kind of what my therapist says too. The therapist had been Pauline's suggestion, and initially my son had resisted the idea. But after a few sessions, he'd admitted it helped to have someone neutral to process everything with, someone whose only job was to listen and help him make sense of his feelings. As for Desmond, he faded from the picture almost entirely. My son mentioned that his mother had stopped talking about him during visits, and I heard through the legal grapevine that their relationship had apparently dissolved under the pressure of the custody battle. The fantasy of a ready-made family had crumbled when confronted with the messy reality of a 14-year-old who wanted nothing to do with a stranger claiming fatherhood. The holidays that year were bittersweet. We spent Thanksgiving with my brother and his family, a small gathering that felt both celebratory and subdued. My nephew, 2 years younger than my son, kept things lively with his endless energy, and watching the cousins toss a football in the backyard gave me glimpses of normalcy I clung to gratefully. "You look better," my brother observed as we stood on the deck watching the kids play. "More solid. I feel better. Still processing a lot, but the constant fear is gone. I know where my son is sleeping every night. I know he's safe. That makes everything else more manageable." "What about you, though? Are you taking care of yourself? This whole thing was a trauma, not just for him, but for you too." I took a sip of my beer, considering the question. "I'm working on it. Started seeing someone myself, actually. A counselor who specializes in divorce and family transitions. It's helping." "Good. You spent so much energy being strong for your kid, you forgot that you needed support too." He was right, of course. For months I'd operated in crisis mode. Every fiber of my being focused on protecting my son, and I'd pushed my own emotional needs to the background. The betrayal by my wife, the destruction of the marriage I'd believed in, the revelation that the biological connection I'd assumed existed had never been there. These were wounds that needed attention. My counselor, a calm man named Hugh with a gray beard and an office full of plants, helped me untangle the complicated feelings. "Grief isn't just for death," he told me during one of our sessions. "You're grieving the loss of a version of your life you believed was real. You're grieving the trust you placed in someone who violated it. That's legitimate pain that deserves to be acknowledged." I keep going back and forth between anger and sadness, I admitted. Some days I'm furious at her for what she did, for the deception that went on for years. Other days I'm just profoundly sad about the whole thing. Both are valid. They're not mutually exclusive, and they don't follow a predictable timeline. The key is not to judge yourself for what you're feeling, but to allow the feelings to move through you. Christmas was smaller, just me and my son. We decorated the tree together, hauling boxes of ornaments down from the attic, and I found myself telling him stories about each one. The delicate glass ball from his first Christmas, the handmade reindeer he'd created in kindergarten, lopsided and perfect, the ornament from our trip to the Grand Canyon when he was 9. I remember that trip, he said, holding the small ceramic canyon with careful hands. You taught me how to play chess on the train. You beat me by the end of the trip. I was genuinely impressed. I've been thinking about all these memories, he said slowly, hanging the ornament on a branch, about how they're still real even though other things weren't. Like, the good stuff from when I was a kid, that actually happened. Mom being there for some of it doesn't erase the parts that were real. That's a mature way of looking at it. My therapist helped me get there. I was stuck for a while feeling like everything was contaminated, like if part of my life was a lie, then all of it was. But that's not true. You were really there. You really loved me. Those parts were solid. I had to turn away for a moment, pretending to untangle some lights. They are. That's never going to change. We finished decorating and made hot chocolate, a tradition I refused to let die. My son put on music, a playlist that mixed Christmas classics with some of the modern songs he'd gotten into lately, and the house felt warm and full despite being emptier than past years. On Christmas morning, he gave me a gift that made me cry. It was a framed photo collage, pictures he'd gathered from throughout his life. His first day of kindergarten, a soccer team photo from 3rd grade, the two of us at a baseball game, hot dogs in hand, grinning at the camera. His middle school graduation, all these moments assembled together with a handwritten note at the bottom. To my dad, thank you for being there for all of it. Love, your son. I know it's kind of cheesy, he said, looking embarrassed. I found a bunch of old photos and scanned them and put it together. I wanted you to have something that showed all the years. It's perfect, I managed. It's absolutely perfect. The new year brought practical challenges. My wife's visitation schedule needed to be established more permanently, which meant more legal proceedings, more negotiations, more tension. But it also brought small victories. My son made the JV basketball team at school. His grades, which had slipped during the worst of the custody battle, started recovering. He made a new friend, a kid named Tommy who shared his love of video games and had a similarly dry sense of humor. Tommy wants to know if I can sleep over Friday, he asked one evening in February. His mom said she'd order pizza and we could stay up playing that new game that came out. Normal teenage stuff, such an ordinary request, but it represented everything I'd been fighting for. A stable life where he could make plans, have friends over, be a kid without the constant shadow of adult conflict looming over everything. That sounds fun. Give me Tommy's mom's number and I'll text her to work out the details. He grinned, already pulling out his phone to share the contact. Thanks, Dad. My wife's supervised visits transitioned to unsupervised visits in the spring, after she'd completed a parenting class and demonstrated several months of consistent, appropriate behavior. My son was cautiously optimistic about the change. I think she's actually trying, he reported after the first unsupervised weekend. Like, she didn't mention Desmond once, and she actually asked me about stuff going on in my life instead of just talking about herself. That's good to hear. How did it feel? Okay, I guess. Still weird, but less uncomfortable than before. She seemed kind of sad, actually, like she's realized she messed everything up and doesn't know how to fix it. People can change. It doesn't erase what happened, but it's possible for things to improve over time. Yeah, he was quiet for a moment. She said she was sorry, like, actually apologized, for all of it. The planning to leave, the way she tried to push you out, all of it. She said she got caught up in something that seemed like a good idea at the time, but wasn't. How did you respond? I told her I appreciated her saying that, but that trust takes time to rebuild. I think I quoted something my therapist said, actually. He smiled slightly. She nodded and said she understood. It was the most honest conversation we've had in a long time. Watching my son navigate this relationship with maturity and boundaries was bittersweet. No teenager should have to manage such complicated family dynamics, but he was handling it with grace that continued to astound me. My own relationship with my wife, now legally my ex-wife once the divorce was finalized in April, settled into a distant but functional co-parenting arrangement. We communicated through a shared app that Pauline had recommended, which kept conversations focused on scheduling and logistics rather than allowing for emotional escalation. It wasn't warmth, but it was workable. One afternoon in late spring, I ran into someone I hadn't seen in years. Her name was Felicity, and we'd worked together at my first job out of college before I met my wife. She was getting coffee at the same cafe I'd stopped at on my lunch break. "Oh my goodness," she said, recognizing me. "It's been, 15 years? Something like that. You look great. You too. What's going on in your life?" We ended up talking for 20 minutes, standing there by the cream and sugar station, catching up on the broad strokes of the intervening years. She'd gone through her own divorce a few years back, had 2 daughters in elementary school, and had recently started her own graphic design business. "We should get dinner sometime," she said, as we finally prepared to part ways. Catch up properly. I surprised myself by saying yes. Our first dinner was comfortable, easy in a way I hadn't expected. Felicity had a quick wit and a warm laugh, and she listened attentively when I mentioned some of what I'd been through without prying for details I wasn't ready to share. We discovered shared interests in hiking and bad action movies and cooking shows. "I'm not looking for anything serious right now," I told her honestly on our second date. "I'm still figuring out who I am after everything that happened, but I enjoy spending time with you." "That's fair," she said. "I'm in a similar place. Companionship without pressure sounds perfect." So we became friends who sometimes had dinner, sometimes went on hikes, sometimes watched movies at her place while her daughters were with their father. It was gentle and undemanding, a reminder that human connection was still possible, even when trust had been so thoroughly broken. My son met Felicity eventually, a casual encounter when she stopped by to return a book she'd borrowed. He was polite and curious, asking me about her after she left. Is she your girlfriend? She's a friend. We're getting to know each other. But you like her? I enjoy her company, yes. He nodded thoughtfully. That's good, Dad. You deserve to have friends. Someone to hang out with who isn't me or Uncle Ray. I happen to enjoy hanging out with you and Uncle Ray. I know. But still, he smiled. She seemed nice. Summer arrived with its particular chaos. My son went to basketball camp for 2 weeks in June, his first extended time away from home since the custody battle. I missed him fiercely, but recognized the importance of normal adolescent experiences. He came back tanned and taller somehow, full of stories about the friends he'd made and the skills he'd developed. This one kid, Nathan, he could hit 3-pointers from like anywhere on the court. It was insane. He demonstrated the shooting motion, mimicking the follow-through. We're going to stay in touch. He lives only 2 hours away. That's great. Maybe he can come visit sometime. Yeah, maybe. His excitement was infectious, a reminder of the resilient spirit that had carried him through the hardest months. My wife, my ex-wife, seemed to be genuinely rebuilding her life as well. My son reported that she'd started going back to school, taking classes toward a certification in something medical-related. She'd moved to a new apartment, smaller but in a nicer neighborhood. She wasn't dating anyone as far as either of us knew, which seemed like a healthy choice. I think she's trying to figure out who she is outside of being in a relationship, my son observed one evening. Like, she was always with you, and then she was planning to be with Desmond, and now she's just herself. I think maybe that's new for her. The insight struck me. For all the pain my ex-wife had caused, she was also a person navigating her own complicated journey. It didn't excuse her choices, but it allowed for a kind of distant compassion. Fall of that year brought my son's 15th birthday. He wanted a small gathering, just a few friends, pizza, and gaming. Tommy came, along with Nathan, who made the drive with his parents, and 2 other boys from the basketball team. I played the role of unobtrusive parent, supplying food and staying mostly out of the way. At one point, I overheard my son talking to his friends in the living room. Your parents are divorced, right? One of them asked, a kid named Bryce, whose own parents had recently separated. Yeah, it was pretty rough for a while. Does it get easier? My son was quiet for a moment. It gets different. You kind of have to build a new normal. But yeah, eventually it doesn't feel like a crisis anymore. It just feels like your life. I stepped back quietly, not wanting to interrupt, but I felt a swell of pride at the wisdom in his words. He'd been through something genuinely difficult and had emerged with depth and resilience. The birthday party wound down around 10, parents arriving to collect their teenagers. After everyone had gone and the cleanup was done, my son slumped on the couch next to me. Good birthday? I asked. Really good. He leaned his head against the cushion, looking at the ceiling. I was thinking earlier about how different this is from last year. Last year I didn't even want to celebrate because everything was so messed up. And now things are just normal. Good, even. A lot can change in a year. Yeah. He turned his head to look at me. Thanks for not giving up. On me, on the court stuff, on everything. I know it would have been easier in some ways to just let Mom have what she wanted. It wouldn't have been easier, I said firmly. It would have been impossible. Giving you up was never an option. I know, but still, thanks. The school year progressed with its usual rhythms. Parent-teacher conferences, basketball games, homework battles over subjects he found boring. My son's grades stabilized, his social life flourished, and his relationship with his mother continued to slowly improve. By winter, they were having what he described as actual conversations during his visits with her. She asked me about my college plans, he reported, like way in the future stuff, and she actually listened to what I said instead of trying to steer me toward what she thought I should do. That's progress. Yeah, I think she's finally understanding that I'm not a little kid she can just mold into whatever she wants. I have my own ideas about things. Felicity and I had also continued to spend time together, our friendship deepening gradually into something more. She joined us for Thanksgiving that year, bringing her 2 daughters and contributing a surprisingly good pumpkin pie. Watching her interact with my son, both of them relaxed and laughing about something I couldn't quite hear, I felt something shift in my chest. Not the desperate attachment of early romance, but something steadier, a possibility. After everyone had gone home and the dishes were washed, my son found me in the living room, looking out the window at the first snowfall of the season. You like her, he said. It wasn't a question. I do. Really like her. Not just as a friend. I turned to face him, curious about where this was going. Is that okay with you? He considered the question seriously. I've been thinking about it. And yeah, I think it's okay. She's good to you. She doesn't try too hard with me, which I appreciate. And she makes you smile in a way you haven't in a while. You've been paying attention. Hard not to. He shrugged. I want you to be happy, Dad. You spent so much time worrying about me. You deserve to have good things too. The role reversal wasn't lost on me. A teenager reassuring his parent that happiness was allowed. But it also reflected the kind of person my son was becoming. Empathetic, perceptive, generous. Thank you, I said. That means a lot. Christmas that year was fuller, louder, more chaotic. Felicity and her daughters joined us along with my brother and his family. The house that had once felt too quiet was suddenly overflowing with people, with laughter, with the kind of controlled chaos that holidays are supposed to bring. My son and Felicity's older daughter, who was 11, discovered a shared love of card games and spent half the afternoon teaching the younger kids increasingly complicated variations. Watching them, I marveled at the family that was slowly forming, not the traditional nuclear structure I'd once assumed my life would hold, but something different, something built from the aftermath of destruction, pieced together with intention and care. My brother cornered me in the kitchen during a quiet moment. "You look happy, like, genuinely happy." "I am." It snuck up on me. "Good, you've earned it." He clapped me on the shoulder. "And the kid seems good too. I've been watching him. He's handling everything like a champ. He's remarkable. Better than I could have hoped for. He's got a good role model." I started to deflect the compliment, but my brother shook his head. "I'm serious. The way you fought for him, the way you prioritized his well-being through all of it, that taught him something important. He knows what loyalty looks like. He knows what love looks like when it's tested. That's not nothing." The new year brought changes. Felicity's lease was ending on her apartment, and we'd been spending more and more time together anyway. The conversation about moving in together happened naturally, over coffee on a Sunday morning, with both of us acknowledging the practical benefits and the emotional significance. "We should talk to all the kids first," I said. "Make sure everyone's comfortable." "Agreed. This affects them just as much as it affects us." My son's response was characteristically thoughtful. "I figured this was coming eventually. As long as I still have my own space and you don't expect me to, call her mom or anything, I'm cool with it. Nobody's expecting you to call anyone anything you're not comfortable with. This is about combining households, not forcing artificial relationships." "Then yeah, I'm fine with it. Might even be nice having more people around." Felicity's daughters were similarly receptive, though the younger one had more questions about logistics like bedroom assignments and bathroom schedules. We talked through everything openly, setting expectations, acknowledging potential challenges, agreeing to communicate when things got difficult. The move happened in March. It was chaotic and exhausting and occasionally frustrating, but there were also moments of unexpected sweetness. My son helping Felicity's younger daughter carry boxes to her new room, all of us sharing takeout on the floor surrounded by half-unpacked belongings, the house gradually filling with the combined evidence of multiple lives. My ex-wife's reaction to the news of Felicity was muted, which was probably the best I could hope for. She told my son she was glad I'd found someone, that it was healthy for everyone to move forward. Whether she meant it or not, the words themselves were civil. Spring arrived with its usual renewal. The backyard, neglected during the worst of the custody battle years, became a project. My son and I spent weekends clearing overgrowth, planting new beds, setting up a small vegetable garden at Felicity's suggestion. Her daughters took ownership of a patch designated for flowers, arguing cheerfully about which colors to plant where. "This is nice," my son said one afternoon as we worked side by side, turning soil for the tomato plants. "Having a project, working towards something. I've missed this. Doing things with my hands that aren't just paperwork or legal documents." "Yeah." He wiped his forehead with the back of his glove. "It feels like our life is actually ours again. Not something that's being decided by lawyers and judges." That summer, my son turned 16. He'd started talking about learning to drive, about getting a job, about all the markers of approaching adulthood. The little boy I'd held in the emergency room, the toddler who'd learned to walk in this living room, was becoming a young man before my eyes. His party was bigger that year, a backyard gathering that included friends from school, cousins, neighbors. Felicity made a cake that was slightly lopsided but delicious. My ex-wife attended briefly, dropping off a gift and staying for a slice of cake before quietly leaving. It was awkward, but manageable, everyone on their best behavior. After the guests had gone, my son found me on the back deck, watching the sunset. "Thanks for today," he said, sitting beside me. "It was perfect." "You're welcome. You only turned 16 once." "I've been thinking about everything that happened. With Mom and Desmond and all of it." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "For a while, I was really angry. Deeply angry at her for what she did, for trying to replace you, for everything. But lately that anger is fading. Not disappearing exactly, but becoming less intense. That's probably healthy. My therapist says it's part of acceptance or whatever, processing the trauma and integrating it into my narrative." He made air quotes around the clinical language. "But it's also just getting further away, you know? The distance makes it smaller somehow. Time can do that. Not erase the pain, but put it in proportion." "Yeah." He looked out at the darkening sky. "I used to wish that the blood test had been wrong, that you really were my biological father. But I don't wish that anymore." "No?" "No, because it wouldn't change anything that actually matters. You're my dad. That's a choice you made every single day for my entire life. The biology stuff is just trivia." His words hit me in a place I hadn't realized was still tender. The revelation of the blood test had wounded me deeply, had made me question the foundation of our relationship, even as I fought to preserve it. But my son was right. What mattered was the choice, the commitment, the daily act of showing up. "I love you," I said simply. "That's never going to change." "I know," he smiled. "I love you too, Dad." We sat together in comfortable silence as the stars began to appear, father and son, bound by something stronger than blood. The years that followed brought the usual mix of challenges and joys. My son got his license, got his first job at a local ice cream shop, navigated the turbulent waters of high school dating. I watched him experience heartbreak and triumph, failure and growth, all the messy beauty of becoming an adult. Felicity and I got married in a small ceremony when my son was 17. He served as my best man, standing beside me with a serious expression that broke into a grin when the officiant pronounced us married. His toast at the reception was funny and heartfelt, referencing inside jokes only the two of us understood. acknowledging the unlikely path that had brought us all together. My ex-wife continued to be part of our lives, her relationship with our son stabilizing into something functional, if not warm. She eventually started dating again, a man from her certification program, and my son reported cautious optimism about the relationship. He seems actually decent, was his assessment, like a regular person who treats her well. When college applications began, I tried not to feel anxious about the impending empty nest. My son applied to schools both near and far, ultimately choosing a university about 4 hours away. It was far enough for independence, close enough for regular visits, a reasonable compromise. The day we dropped him off at his dorm remains vivid in my memory. Felicity and her daughters came along, turning it into a family affair. We helped carry boxes up 3 flights of stairs, set up his computer, made his bed with the new sheets we'd bought together. His roommate seemed nice, a lanky kid from out of state who immediately bonded with my son over their shared taste in music. When it was time to say goodbye, I felt the tears threatening. My son, who at 18 was taller than me, pulled me into a hug. "I'm going to be fine," he said. "You raised me to handle things. I know you'll be fine. I'm crying for me, not you." He laughed, and the sound was so familiar, so precious. "Call me when you get home, and maybe don't text me too much the first week. I need to at least pretend to be a cool independent college student." Deal. The drive home was quiet, Felicity's hand resting on mine as the miles passed. The house felt different when we returned, emptier despite the other people who lived there now. My son's room, which we'd agreed to leave largely intact for his visits, seemed to echo with all the years of bedtime stories and late-night talks and ordinary moments that had somehow become extraordinary in retrospect. But emptiness wasn't the same as loss. My son was out in the world, building his own life, equipped with everything I'd been able to give him. And our bond, tested so severely during those terrible months of custody battles and revelations, had only grown stronger. We talked regularly, video calls and texts and the occasional surprise visit when he had a weekend free. He's 23 now, just graduated, working his first real job in a city I'd never lived in. He has friends I've never met, experiences I'll only hear about secondhand, a whole life that's his own. Sometimes that makes me wistful, remembering the little boy who once thought I hung the moon, but mostly, it fills me with pride. Because the thing I've learned, the thing those terrible months taught me, is that fatherhood isn't about possession. It isn't about blood or biology or legal documents. It's about presence. It's about showing up, day after day, even when everything is falling apart. It's about fighting for the people you love, and then letting them go into the world strong enough to fight for themselves. My son called last week, excited about a promotion at work. "They're giving me my own project to manage," he said, and I could hear the pride in his voice. "It's a big deal. I'm so proud of you." "Thanks, Dad. Hey, I was thinking of coming home for a weekend next month. Maybe we could do that hike we always talk about? The one up to the waterfall? I'd love that." "Cool. I'll send you the dates and we can figure out logistics." After we hung up, I sat for a while with the warmth of the conversation. Outside, the garden Felicity and I maintained was beginning its spring bloom, all the careful work of past years showing results. The life I have now is nothing like the one I imagined when I was a young man planning his future. It's messier, more complicated, built on the ruins of something that collapsed under the weight of deception, but it's also richer than anything I could have planned. I have a wife who loves me, stepchildren who've become family, a brother who never stopped supporting me through the hardest times. I have work that fulfills me, friends who matter, a house full of memories that are genuinely mine, and I have my son. Not through biology, but through something more powerful, through the simple, profound act of choosing each other every single day. The truth that surfaced during that routine medical appointment almost a decade ago threatened to destroy everything. For a while, I thought it might. The ground shifted and crumbled, and I couldn't see any path forward that didn't lead to loss. But my son stood up in that courtroom and spoke his truth. He pointed at the stranger trying to claim his life and said, simply clearly, that he knew who his father was. That moment changed everything. Not because it magically fixed what was broken, but because it showed me what mattered. In the end, it wasn't about winning or losing in court. It was about the relationship we'd built over 14 years of ordinary days, and the fact that when everything else fell away, that relationship remained solid. I still think about it sometimes, especially when I'm feeling nostalgic, or when some milestone reminds me of how far we've come. My son's courage in that courtroom, his clarity about what was real and what wasn't, his willingness to stand up against the adults in his life who were failing him. He was braver at 14 than I felt at 40. But that's the thing about children. They see through all the complications and manipulations that adults construct. They know who loves them. They know who shows up. They know who their family really is. I was lucky. Lucky that my son chose me. Lucky that the legal system worked in our favor. Lucky that I had the resources and support to fight. Not everyone in my situation would have been so fortunate. But I try not to take that luck for granted. Every day with my son, every phone call, every visit, every moment of connection, I recognize it for the gift it is. Because he could have been taken from me. That plan my son discovered on his mother's phone, the scheme to start fresh in Portugal with Desmond and his family, could have worked. If my son hadn't seen those messages, if he hadn't trusted me enough to share what he'd learned, if the timing had been just slightly different, I might be writing a very different story today. Instead, I'm sitting in my garden on a quiet spring evening, thinking about the hike my son and I are planning, the waterfall we're going to see together, the hours of conversation we'll share on the trail, small things, ordinary things, The kind of things that make up a life. That's what I fought for all those years ago. Not dramatic victories or vindication or revenge against the woman who betrayed me. Just the ordinary privilege of watching my son grow up, of being part of his life, of remaining his father in all the ways that matter. And now, looking back, I can say with certainty that every moment of struggle was worth it. Every sleepless night, every anxious day, every difficult conversation, all of it led here. To a life that's imperfect but deeply good. To relationships built on honesty and trust. To a son who knows exactly who his father is. There's no dramatic ending to this story, no neat resolution where every wound is healed and every question answered. Life isn't like that. The complications continue. The relationships require ongoing work. The scars from that period remain, softened by time but never fully erased. But that's okay, because what I've learned, what my son taught me through his courage and his love, is that the measure of a life isn't found in its perfection. It's found in its authenticity, in the willingness to show up imperfectly and try anyway, in the choice to love even when love is hard. My son will always be my son, not because of blood or biology, but because we chose each other. And that choice, made fresh every day, is the strongest bond there is.